What's up, everyone, and welcome to the weekly Q&A. For our first question, Mr. J.D. Rice asks how important we think it is that Favreau have a plan for The Mandalorian.
This is coming off the whole discussion this past week about plans in the sequel trilogy. It got brought back up because JJ said something about having to learn that the hard way, and everyone started arguing over plans and whether or not they're important or not, and I don't really think that you have to have like a full-on, every script written before you go into a story. I think you should just have a basic idea of the story you want to tell and what you want to say with it.
A plan?
In what sense? I don't necessarily think that Favreau has to have every story beat mapped out for The Mandalorian. He has said that he didn't know Luke was going to be in it when he first started writing it down. I think he should know probably where Din's story is headed and how he wants it to end. Like, what is the journey for this character? Mm-hmm. But not necessarily every story beat along the way.
Do you think he knew Luke was going to be in it by the time they were shooting it?
I don't know. He just said when he was first, when he first had the idea, I think he said when they were doing season 1, or when he had finished writing, maybe when they were starting to film season 1, he didn't know that's where they were going to go. I think he knew that a Jedi was going to come, but whether or not it was Luke, I don't know. And I'm kind of speculating now, but I remember him saying, we didn't know we were going to bring Luke into the show when we started.
Yeah. I'm a fan of plans.
I am too.
I think if not an entire fleshed out plan, definitely some sort of outline, general outline. And yeah, story beats like having Luke Skywalker show up in The Mandalorian can be added in later. But definitely an outline.
It's a tricky discussion because a plan isn't necessary to tell a good story. The original trilogy was not planned, but George Lucas was there the whole time and he knew the story he wanted to tell. He knew what the trilogy was about, even if those details changed. Even if Leia all of a sudden became Luke's sister and Vader all of a sudden became Luke's father. No matter what, those are details and they're significant ones, but I think that the overall journey for Luke would have remained the same.
Yeah.
And I don't think that there was one consistent vision for the sequel trilogy. That's my bigger issue, is that no one said, what do we want to say with episodes 7, 8, and 9? It was more what came first was, let's make 7, 8, and 9. Mm-hmm. It should be the other way around.
Right. And we're big fans of improv comedy, and that's a perfect example of having a plan is the opposite of what you want. And not saying that anything Star Wars is doing is improv or should be improvised, but some lines are improvised and they turn out to be great. Like DJ's line in The Last Jedi, his last line of just saying maybe, Benicio del Toro just improv'd that line.
Or of course, Han Solo's I know. It wasn't improvised on that spot, but he and Kirshner decided what to say right before shooting it. Mm-hmm. But I will say, improv comedy very rarely has an actual ending. They just stop the scene whenever you get a big laugh, and it's well, that's over.
Yeah.
And I don't want to say plans aren't great either, because look at the High Republic. According to the Luminous writers, they knew all the major events that they were going to do. They mapped out the basic story. Mm-hmm. And I feel that. When I'm reading it, I'm yeah, we are moving along at a good, fast pace. It is exciting and fresh every time. For the first 2 waves, I act like it's been going on for years, but so far I'm man, they're crushing it. So
yeah, and everything connects really nicely, between the different books and the comics, and just lots of little connections everywhere, and you can only really make that happen if you have a plan.
Yeah. I think I just, like, I see people arguing over whether or not a plan is, like, you have to have one. And I'm like, you don't have to have one. And I mean, look, if people, like, love the sequel trilogy front and back, and there's from front to back.
Start to finish.
Uh-huh. If they love the sequel trilogy, and, like, they don't care about a plan. And it's like, we don't argue about the plan for the original trilogy because it worked. Like, you didn't need one. It worked out. So it's one of those, there is no, like, yes or no to this. It's like, yeah, sometimes you want one. I think the sequel trilogy would have benefited from one.
Yeah.
For sure.
We're not arguing that that JJ did have a plan or anything like that, or like,
well, I mean, even according to him, he didn't have one.
yeah. I mean, it's obvious. Like, he wasn't supposed to come in and do the end, episode 9. So it was like, he's good at setting stuff up, not so good at the finishing things, tying everything up part.
Yeah, and it just kind of seems like episode 9 has this. I mean, and Daisy Ridley said as much, that it was like her parentage was changing, like, in the midst of production.
Yeah.
And that to me is like, well, at least have a plan for the movie. Like, the movie you're filming now, movie at a time. I understand having, like, yeah, taking that a bit at a time, but when you're in the midst of shooting, that seems like a big detail to have up in the air. Anyway.
Moving on.
For Jon Favreau, to bring it all back to the actual question, I'm not that concerned with the idea that they might not have everything planned out, because I think Jon Favreau is, like, he's that one driving force, that he has a vision for this story and he's there to oversee it. So that, I think, is probably more important than having it all mapped out.
Kyle Barat wants to know how Boba Fett had Jango Fett's chain code if chain codes weren't invented until well after Jango's death.
I read that and I was like, oh, Star Wars, Kyle got you.
Kyle got you.
I mean,
It's like Joan Gotcha in Parks and Rec.
Kyle gotcha. So I think that we can probably make something up that would answer that, like kind of a retroactive chain code, or maybe, so Boba Fett is like, here's my chain code, and it pulls up. So I does he say it was his father's chain code embedded into the armor, or if it was his, and maybe it just was like, here's my chain code, which involves my parentage.
I think it was, here's mine.
Should have watched this clip before answering the question.
But simple answer is that there's no way to really explain this. It's just, oh, here's a name for this thing now.
I'd say I've got some ideas. Yeah, like I think that maybe Boba Fett was using chain code as just kind of like a colloquialism. Like, here's my chain code. I mean, Mandalorians, we call it something different. Although, why wouldn't he say that to Din? But I think he could have been like, here's my life, this armor's chain code, its life history and who it belonged to. I mean,
maybe like you said, Mandalorians or just some people just always had some kind of identification, and then the Empire came along and started calling it chain
they
codes.
Just took it. Yeah, Mandalorians were using it first, and the Empire was like, I like that, I'm gonna take it, it's mine now.
Yeah, because Mandalorians are all about the family line, and the armor is passed down from generation to generation.
Yeah,
so
Sabine's armor, Bo-Katan's armor.
It makes sense to have some sort of serial number on the armor to prove whose it is.
Yeah.
But
so, okay, I like that. Mando people created chain codes, and then the Empire was like, that sounds cool, we're just going to use that.
Yeah, taking it. That's mine now. Flash Turtle asks what our pitch would be for the next animated series.
I think we might have the same one. And I don't have like a full-on pitch. I'm just like, let's go High Republic.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm obsessed at this point. that is my current like top tier Star Wars thing right now.
Let's go High Republic in the style of, I don't know, like
I was gonna throw out maybe like anime. That is some like they do such cool and like over the top and sometimes visually, not even like spiritually interesting stuff that I think anime, and we've talked before about how we have not seen a ton of anime, so I might be talking out my ass, but I think that they could do some really cool stuff with like some 2D animation.
Yeah, I agree. I think we're going to get anime styles in Visions. So why not put all the High Republic stuff in something similar to what we're going to see in there.
I'm really interested to see what Visions looks like. But yeah, maybe that's like testing the waters.
Because, I mean, anime is something that most people will agree that you don't see an animated show and it's like immediately you think, oh, this is for kids.
That's true.
I think there's a lot of people out there who love anime so much that like they wouldn't immediately assume that it was like kids show. So, and I think you could get away with making it more adult.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that's a good point. But yeah, I think that, you know, the animated series have all kind of stuck into the Skywalker saga era, and I'm ready for something to jump out of that in the High Republic. I mean, to me, I don't know. I'd be curious to talk to like a more casual Star Wars fan. Like my parents know that it exists only because they know me. I don't know.
Would you want to see what we've seen so far in the books animated, or would you want to see like a brand new story?
Sometimes
for me, like for me, like Light of the Jedi, I would love to see that animated.
Sometimes I read what's happening, and all of the authors are doing such a great job of making it feel very cinematic, and I'm like, ugh, I wish like we could see this. But I'm also just like, I kind of like the idea that that's their story and they're telling it very well, and I don't want anything to come along and steal their thunder. So like I'm fine if they do a completely different but still High Republic story. Mm-hmm. And it probably maybe take place before the Great Disaster. Like, we can go back a little bit further, because I think that the story the High Republic books and comics are telling is like the beginning of the end, like the beginning of the decline for the Jedi. Mm-hmm. Whereas I think we could go around and do some just like full-on Jedi at their height action.
Yeah. And we could go maybe to the beginning of the High Republic, like when it first started, see just what that looks like and see what the Jedi training looked like back then.
Yeah.
Although I always think that there should be something for a younger audience for Star Wars, so give us the youngling arc in its own show.
You want them to fulfill that promise of that backdoor pilot?
Yes.
That they were going to do?
Yes. I want Gungi with his cool lightsaber. Like, I just think that would be a cool show for kids to watch. And, you know, just like any other Star Wars show, the characters kind of growing and learning as the younger audience does.
I think that would be interesting. I mean, and not completely out of left field, because I think that this is like me hearing this stuff third, fourth hand, so who knows, or reading it online, but I think I read somewhere that the Bad Batch arc was planned as a backdoor pilot, or that at least the show's been in development for a long, long time. So yeah, it would be interesting if they took kind of all of those Clone Wars ideas and followed up on them. My only concern is that it's like, okay, now we have 2 animated shows in like the exact same time period. But like you said, that could be targeted for a much younger audience.
Mm-hmm. And I still think, unless they're going to write the unfinished Clone Wars arcs into new stuff, like, why not just go back and animate all of those arcs and release them as little mini-series and call it, like, the
super Lost missions.
Yeah.
Because they already did the Lost missions.
The Lost missions. Call it something, and yeah, like, give us Dark Disciple, but animated, fully animated and fleshed out.
I'm down.
Cole wants to know if concussions exist in Star Wars because people seem to be fine after suffering major head trauma all the time.
Yes, when they have to. I mean, honestly, like, that's true of not just Star Wars, like all movies, all television. You see someone get a bottle broken over their head and they're just like, oh, like, no, that would put you down.
Yeah.
So, but I do think it's funny. And I put this in because of the Bad Batch episode yesterday. You were like, stop hitting Wrecker in the head.
Please.
He gets hit in the head a lot. He's got those headaches. We know something bad is coming. Stop whacking him in the head.
Yeah. I think they do exist. We've just never seen them called that, or, you know, we don't necessarily see the downtime post injury.
Well, it's like, I mean,
have we ever seen someone? Yeah, for sure. Somewhere we've seen someone get knocked out cold, right?
I was about to say, like, it happened in the Fennec Shand episode. Like, she knocks out Wrecker, she headbutts
That's
Hunter.
Right, yeah.
So, like, that's again, when the story needs someone to be incapacitated, they'll get knocked out. Otherwise, no. Like, as long as they're acting fine and still awake, they probably don't have a concussion.
Uncle Juan Kenobi asks what our nicknames and special abilities would be if we were in the Bad Batch.
So I thought up Molly's and Molly thought up mine, and we don't know what they are. I was going to name you Vixen, and your special ability would be extra sass, and you'd fight with fans.
Ooh, like a katana.
Uh-huh, but you could also use them for drama.
Yeah.
They're not just weapons, they're also practical.
I have to be able to throw shade.
Uh-huh.
I mean.
You can throw shade and your bladed fans.
Yeah, I like that. I think for you, so my nickname would be Vixen.
Uh-huh.
I think your nickname would be One-Up.
Okay.
And your ability is that you just one-up everyone.
So I'm just, like, kind of a jerk.
You're like a fast learner, and everyone else's abilities, you somehow are able to do them better than
that might be what Omega has. That's a theory that's swirling around.
Well,
so
I thought of it first.
Her nickname could be One-Up eventually. Okay, I like that. Like, yeah, that's, what do they call it? There's a name for it, for someone who can just, like, really quickly pick up any
Jack
task.
of all trades.
Yeah, or a mimic. That's what I've seen people calling Omega, is that maybe she's a mimic. She sees Hunter doing his tracking, looking at dirt, and then she can track and look at dirt.
Yeah.
That's
really impressive,
one.
Hunter.
Uh-huh. Okay, I like that One-Up. I like the idea of being able to put Tech in his place.
Yeah, but it's like you can only do it like once a day.
And then I have to take a nap like Baby Yoda. That's it for patron questions. If you're a patron and you didn't see your question answered here, just head over to Patreon where we left you a written response. If you're not a patron, you can learn more by following the link in the description. Just $1 a month will get you access to extra Star Wars Explained content like audio commentaries for the films, and we're doing audio commentaries for the Bad Batch episodes as they're released, so up through episode 4 is available right now, and episode 5 will be out soon if you're interested.
On to YouTube questions. Aldo Hamar asks if we could see what happened to the Lasat in the Bad Batch.
Could, yes. You know, I feel like we've answered this at some point before, and I think I said that it would be too dark. But then we got the 3rd episode of the Bad Batch, and I'm like, maybe.
Yeah.
Depends on when it happened. I feel like it happened because Callus was involved, and he's still a fairly young agent, I would say, in Star Wars Rebels. So I feel like that isn't going to happen right away.
Yeah, we definitely could see what happened in the Lasat and Bad Batch. I think if we did, it would be more just like a mention, which wouldn't really do it justice.
Right.
But I don't know if they ran into a Lasat, they could just briefly say what happened.
I love the idea of seeing Lasat in the Bad Batch.
Yeah, I do too. But I like maybe in the second season or something, if it's gonna have a second season, because I feel like that would be like an arc to talk about if they teamed up and like tried to help some of them or
help refugees or yeah, that's a good idea.
Jesper Levels wants to know how chairs work in the Jedi Council. Do you get the same chair every time? Why are some of the chairs different at all?
They specifically point out the fact that Depa Billaba, who is a human, sits in a chair that usually alien Jedi Masters sit in, and it's just like, what's up with that? And I kind of like the idea that it's like in school when you don't have assigned seats, more like I guess in college, but like you still wind up sitting in the same seat. Like you just kind of claim that, and everyone has this understanding.
Yeah.
But what if like some of the chairs are more comfortable and it's like a mad dad, like Yoda gets there early every time so he can get his tiny chair.
I feel like Yoda's chair, especially, like everyone knows that's his chair.
Or maybe he can walk in last because like, oh, I'm not taking the tiny chair. So there's no pressure for him. But like maybe Depa Billaba, maybe the alien Jedi Master chairs are very comfortable and she's like, I'm getting there early. I'm getting one of those alien chairs, and Kit Fisto's over there like, come on.
Oh, yeah, I like that. Yeah, because you'd have to sit, like, if you were a normal size, you'd have to sit real cross-legged and like all bunched up if you were in Yoda's chair.
Uh-huh.
And I don't know if that would be some kind of power move or...
It's like, I do wonder, I don't know if they have assigned seating, or like I imagine Yoda sits in that one spot every time, but like we've also seen the chairs can be moved around, and it does. I'm like, why isn't he in the middle? You'd feel like Grand Master should be in the middle. I don't know why.
Then he'd have to constantly be swiveling to talk to everyone.
I guess, yeah, that's true.
Tiny swivel.
Tiny swivel.
AJF Studios asks how Han got his blaster back in Return of the Jedi.
I'm going to say Wisties. They're the closest thing, hear me out, they're the closest thing to like fairies that exist in Star Wars. Mm-hmm. So I'm just going to say like it's the lost item fairy, but it's a Wistie. And so, you know, when Kylo Ren drops his helmet on Starkiller Base and he's like, oh no, I forgot it. And then it's in The Last Jedi, little Wistie brought it up for him and was like, don't worry, I got your helmet. And then when Luke throws his lightsaber away on the second Death Star, but he has it back on Endor, little Wistie flies in. It's like, he's going to want this. He's going to regret throwing that away.
You know what? Yeah, I'm on board with this. And were they made canon?
Wisties? Yeah, they're in Battlefront 2.
That's right. Yeah. Okay, so yeah. I like that reasoning. And maybe one day we'll see them in action in a show or something.
It's the magical prop Wistie. We stopped and I was like, I guess I should provide a real answer. But I mean, the real answer is that he just does. He just gets it back. The same way that Kylo Ren has his helmet again in The Last Jedi. Like, it's Han Solo's iconic blaster. And then for them to... It would be more confusing, I think, if he were to just, like, have a different blaster. And people would be like, oh, where's that other one? And then they'd be like, are you going to stop and explain that, like, oh, I miss my old blaster? Like, it's just a production thing, and you expect to see Han Solo with that blaster, so he just has it again.
Yeah, I mean, they take the time in Indiana Jones to show every time he loses his hat, him getting it back.
But the hat's a big deal.
Yeah.
When the hat falls off, that is like...
That's very noticeable.
Yes. I mean, that's... I remember when Ben Burt was doing the sound design for it, he was like, let me ask you a question, George and Steven. When I'm designing the sound for this, is this the kind of movie where the hero's hat never falls off? And they were like, yes. And he was like, got it. And he did everything over the top. Now you're sending me on an Indiana Jones tangent, but... I did think of another thing, is that might not be Han's actual blaster. Like, Luke has a DL-44 in Empire as well, so maybe he got a different DL-44 because he just likes the feel of it.
Yeah, maybe Han made them cool, and then they were just everywhere. And he was like, I had the first one. Joe Iorio wants to know what would have happened to Tarkin if he had evacuated the Death Star.
I think that's an interesting question, because...
Like, evacuated himself, or, like, evacuated the entire Death Star?
If he pooped his pants,
no.
Then all...
I mean, like, if just he left with Chief Bast.
Okay. No, I think just if he left.
Uh-huh.
If he and Chief Bast were like, good luck with all this, and they left, I don't think anything good would have happened to him. The first Darth Vader comic by Kieran Gillen that started in 2015, the Emperor holds Vader responsible for the loss of the Death Star because he was the only survivor and he was the only person available to punish. I think that Tarkin would have been held accountable for the loss of the Death Star if he had evacuated. And I really like the idea of him trying to pass the blame to someone else, but it's like, you just had Krennic shot with the super laser.
Yeah.
So, like, who do you have left?
I think he would have had to have gone into hiding. Something like, he'd be like, all right, Obi-Wan, I see the appeal. He just lives out the rest of his days on Tatooine.
It's like, he's known for being ruthless, and I mean, that's like the thing with the Empire, is like they backstab, they step on each other, and eventually you get to a point where there's no one else to do that to. And so I think that the Emperor would have had him executed or something. But that's kind of like the fun irony to think about, is that, maybe he felt like he couldn't evacuate because Krennic wasn't around. And if Krennic were around, you could just blame it on him.
Yeah, I think deep down he knew, like, if this goes wrong, I'm going down with the ship.
Yeah.
He's like the captain in Titanic.
And I mean, I don't want to give him too much nobility, because I do think that he was fully like, there's no way they're going to blow this station up. There's no way. He believed that.
Yeah.
That's all the time we have for questions today. If you want to leave a question for next week's video, just put it in the comments below, or sign up for Patreon to join our weekly Q&A discussion. If you haven't already, please like this video, subscribe to the channel.
Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitch.
And as always, thanks for watching, and may the Force be with you.